should be going. Okay. All right, now we're capturing. Okay, so last time I just showed you all how to install the Amazon MTurk command line tools, which allow you to do more stuff with MTurk than what you can do through the website. And it allows you to do things in masse, like paying bonuses in masse. And what was the other thing?
We just did bonuses, and today we're going to do qualifications.
Yeah, today we're going to do qualifications. So this is going to be hopefully a bit shorter than last time because we already kind of went through all the boilerplate stuff last time and setting things up. But the basic thing that you have to use to interact with this stuff is a command line. If you're using Mac, you already have this. It's built in. I'm using Linux, but Mac and Linux are kind of the same fundamental operating system, just with different user interfaces. Yeah. So you have a program called Terminal, and you can use that, and it's exactly the same as this terminal here. So you have all the same commands, like ls lists everything in the directory that you're in. This is just another way of interacting with your computer other than like the normal graphical way, like with your home directory or whatever. So instead of clicking on things and dragging, you type commands into this terminal. Kind of like you do with MATLAB or R or whatever. And let's see what else. If you're using Windows, you have to install something called PowerShell, and then you get the same command line. I think it's a slightly different command line, so you have slightly different commands, but the MTurk documentation for every command that you want to use, it has an example of how you run it in Mac and how you run it in Windows. So it's really good documentation. So today we're gonna, last time we went over paying bonuses in masse, and today we're just gonna talk about qualifications. So qualifications, see, I've got a plan here. This is all, sorry, I've got this Windows thing separately so I can use Windows. Okay, so let me show you basically how this works when you create a hit in the first place. So if I go to my MTurk requester page, and let's see if I manage, I think, yeah. Okay, so I've got results, workers qualified. Okay, that's not what I want. Okay, create. A hit. Okay, so I'll just copy. Actually, I can probably just edit this and show you the relevant stuff. So this is this demo hit that I used last time to just have 10 workers click submit so I could pay them bonuses. I'll show you how that works. So the setup properties that I have for this hit, you've got your basic stuff like what it says when you go to the website and look for it, the instructions, the payment per hit, the number of people that I'm going to allow to do this hit, the time limit, expiration date, and so forth. And then down here, worker requirements. This is the part that's really useful for researchers. So I have no qualifications for this hit whatsoever. I just allowed anyone to click submit. But normally for a hit, you would want to restrict to workers that maybe are of a certain quality level, so they have a certain success rate with previous jobs they've done. Or I usually restrict to only US users. That essentially the main thing that does is eliminate people primarily in India who have lots and lots of accounts that sort of automate submission of hits. Ran into that the very first hit I did. I had about half of my submissions were from the same IP address but different accounts. So if you're not tracking IP address especially, which I think sometimes ethics requires you not to do depending on your project, it's hard to weed that out. So just restricting to US.
I just want to pause there for a second.
Yeah.
So that's really worth stressing. Yeah. When you're doing your MTurk, I know a lot of us do this, and I think it's in Stephen's file, right, that you just have a look at that IP address. Now sometimes you can have a couple of people from the same account, and it's not a big deal. It could be like students in a share house that are doing it. But as a general rule, it is a problem. It often means that people are like faking their entry for you just to access a route.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the share house thing is relevant too. I usually, even when I restrict to U.S. users, I still look at all the IP addresses, and if there's anyone from the same IP address, it could be like a husband and wife who are both doing something, or people in a share house, and they're still allowed to do the hit, and I pay them and everything, and they're incorporated in the data in that sense. But then I don't include their data in the analysis because they might have been talking to each other, and it's usually some kind of interactive task where they're going to be matched with the next person or something like that. So I just eliminate that data. Okay, so yeah, so MTurk allows you to do a lot of restrictions on who's doing the hit. It doesn't allow you to restrict IP addresses. It only allows you to restrict things that are tied to the worker ID, and someone can have lots of worker IDs. So there's lots of different criteria that you can set. The three basic ones that are free, essentially, you can set a specific hit approval rate, so it can be greater than or less than, I don't know why you would want less than, some particular threshold. You can set the location to any particular country or state. The number of hits approved, so if you want someone who hasn't just created an account but is sort of a little bit more experienced, you can set a threshold for the number of hits. So those are all really useful, but then the real value comes from custom qualifications. So at the bottom here, you've got all of these premium qualifications that I think you have to pay extra to use. Some of them are really useful for research, like if you voted in the last election, if you're doing political research, for example. But I've never used any of those. The ones I use are qualification types I've created. And this didn't used to be something you were able to do with MTurk. It's only been true for the last like 4 years or so, that you could create custom qualifications and restrict access based on them. Or, well, you could always create qualifications and restrict access based on someone having that qualification, but now you can eliminate people that have that qualification granted. So this is the thing that's really useful for researchers. So what I typically do is every study that I run or every treatment within a study, I create a new qualification and I assign it to all my workers. You can give them any value between 1 and 100, or 0 and 100 is just an integer number. And then based on, sometimes I've done, the number has been the treatment group that they were in. You could do fancier things like if you had a yes or no share or not share thing and you wanted to only re-query the people who had been generous in the first stage, you could assign a qualification based on their actual responses. You can get really creative or fancy with how you do that. But so far all I've done whatsoever is assign a qualification that says they participated in this particular study, so if I run a very similar study in the future, I can prevent them from doing it again.
So I just want to pause there. So in our lab, we have this huge file by a guy called Stephen that just talks about how to set up studies on MTurk, and you can apply some of the principles to other sources like Prolific Academic or any other online source. But this business of screening is really important, especially if you're using like a norm manipulation or whatever. I mean, some of our manipulations are transparent and you don't actually need to exclude people, but many of them, they are. They do need to be excluded. So this could potentially be really helpful to assign IDs to workers like they did a DIME study, or they've done a study with an identity salience manipulation or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
This could be useful.
Yeah. Okay, so how this works, to create a new qualification, you go to Manage, Qualification Types. And I only have 3 so far because I have them broken down by treatments within the same qualification. But it's really easy to create a new one. Just click here, Demo Qualification. And I give it a description that says they participated in the MTurk demo hit. I'll create that. Okay, I have to refresh until it shows up, which usually does immediately, yeah. Okay, so we got the demo qualification. You can click here and get the details about it that you need. Oh yeah, no, we just need the ID. So it has a qualification ID, and this is the ID that you need when you assign the qualification, either through, there's a couple different ways. When you download your results, you download a CSV file with all of the data, and there's some way that you can add columns to that and check the columns and re-upload the CSV to assign qualifications, but I've never done that. I've always just done it through the command line tools, so I'm not sure how that works exactly. But this is the ID that you need to work with it through the command line tools. So how does that work? So we can Google, if we just look up the command that we're going to need is called assign qualification. So just to review a little bit what we did last time, we installed our command line tools to this directory, so I'm going to change to that directory, and in the bin folder are all the different tools that I have available. So the one I'm going to use here is assign qualification, and I can make sure that my MTurk account settings are all set up properly by running get balance, because there's no arguments to that or anything, and just see if it works, which it should.
If you had accidentally typed grant bonus,
nothing would happen. Yeah, in fact, I can just do that. It's gonna say you didn't give me the arguments you needed. Yeah,
okay, good.
Missing worker ID. Yeah. So a grant balance worked, so everything should be set up properly. I'm not going to do it right here in this directory because this is sort of the installation folder. I'd rather go to my folder where I keep my files for that research project. So here I've got, in this folder here, I just listed the contents of my folder, and I've got my results from the 10 people. I've got this script that I ran last time to grant the bonuses for them. This is a file that MTurk uses with the hit ID. MTurk.properties is that file you always have to have wherever you're working, because it tells the command line tools how to access your particular MTurk account.
And in the video from 2 weeks ago, it tells you how to set up
the
file.
This is all of this stuff is in the previous video. Okay, so here, okay, so that's where I am. This is the command I'm going to use, assign qualification. So let's see what we have to actually give to this command to run it. The first thing that is important to know is that you can use this flag called do not notify. And this, I always use this because this means I can just give qualifications to workers and they're not going to have any notification that they got that qualification. It's not really relevant to them, so there's no reason to bother them, and then they won't be confused about what this means. Qualifications for most, the thing that MTurk was originally designed for was for big companies to put up all these tasks for people to do, and so qualifications were originally just for people who had gone through some training process and were now eligible to do those types of hits. So back in that era, people would care about what types of qualifications they had, but for research purposes, qualifications are only relevant to the researcher, so there's no reason to notify them about it.
They can still find out.
Yeah, they can still go to their account and find a list of all their qualifications.
Yeah, by the way.
Exactly. So with every command, you can run the help. So the way that works is assign qualification.sh minus h. So I used the command, and all I gave it, instead of the regular parameters, I just said minus h or dash h for help, and it tells me all the different parameters that I need to give this command, and it's basically the same thing that's on the web page here. So I've got do not notify, which I always use. There's a couple ways to use this command. So first of all, I can give it a file with the qualification type that I'm assigning, or I can just give it to it on the command line itself, which is what I've always done. So I can give it the qual type ID on the command line itself. Sandbox means you're not actually running it, you're just testing it. The score is the value that I'm giving that person of the qualification, any number between 0 and 100. a score file. Okay, worker ID is the worker ID that I'm giving the qualification for. And there's also this thing called score file, which allows you to give a qualification to lots of different workers at once. So when we granted bonuses in bulk last week, or a couple weeks ago, all we did was run the same command for lots and lots of different people and put them in a script file together in order to run them all at once. But the assign qualification command allows you to do that without even creating a script. It just allows you to give it a file of all the worker IDs to do it in bulk, which I didn't actually know about until yesterday when I looked at the help page. I've always just run the same command for a lot of different workers. So either way. Okay, so let's try this out for one person. So let's see. We can open up our batch results. Okay, so there's hit ID, description, keywords. I need the worker ID to assign it to them. So there's the worker ID. So let's just do the first person first as an example, as a single person. So that's the worker ID. I know I'm going to want to do assign qualification.sh minus do not notify. And then the next thing I need, I'm not going to use the input file, I'll just use the qual type ID directly. The worker ID is the thing that I just copied. And it looks like the only other thing I need is the qual type ID. So minus qual.
So with the attributes, it doesn't matter what order you put them in,
right,
as long as they're on the same line.
Yeah,
accept them.
Exactly. Okay. The qualification I'm assigning is this one. And hopefully this will work. Yeah. So success. It says assigned. Oh, I didn't give it a score. Whatever. Let's assign a score.
So what is the default?
I think it just. That's a good question. Let's see what the help says.
So the default is 1.
Default score of 1. Yes. So if I do score 1, it's not going to change anything. But if I run this exactly the same and give it a different score value, okay, you can't redo it with the same qualification. All right, so I'll do it for the next one. Oops. The next worker on here was this one. So we can assign a qualification for this worker. Oops. That's the right one, yeah, okay. So if I assign the qualification for this worker with a different score, it should work. Great. So it says successfully assigned a qualification with value 2. Okay, so if I wanted to do this in bulk, again, just like we did with the grant bonuses, I can do it. I'll try and I'll illustrate both ways. You can do it either by running the same command in a script file, or you can do it. Or you can do it with the file of worker IDs that the command itself will take. But if I split it up and do these 4 people in a batch file, then what I'm going to do, or what I'm going to need, actually I'm not going to do that. It's easy enough to do it this way. So I'll create a new script called assign qualifications.sh. This is a new script. These are the 4 worker IDs I'm going to use. And for each one, I'm going to run the command. I'm going to use do not notify. Let's see, what else do we have?
You had a value?
Yes. I'll just copy this. I gave it the qual type give it the score, and finally the worker ID. So for each worker ID, I'm going to have the same thing. And that should be all I need. So I'll save this, close the script, and then to actually run it, so right now I just have it as a regular file called assignqualifications.sh in my folder. To make it something I can actually run, I have to turn it into a script, which I do with the chmod command. This is also what we use for the grant bonuses. So chmod u plus x, and then I give it the file name. What this does is it changes the properties of the file. It gives the user, the u, additional abilities to execute, which is the x, the file. So that's all I have to do for that. And now I should be able to run that file. And I do that with a / the script name. Great. Cool. So you can see each of the 4 values worked. Occasionally, I would pay attention, by the way, I didn't mention this last week, but do pay attention to the output you get here and make sure that all of them succeeded, because sometimes if your internet blinks or something like that, one of them will fail, and then I just go back and run that particular line.
So if there's like a power surge or something, it can interrupt one of the things.
Yeah, but then it's just it's basically just trying all of these sequences of commands. So if the internet goes out, it'll fail, and then the internet reconnects, and then the next one it tries will succeed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often, though?
No, very rarely. Okay. So we've assigned qualifications to 6 out of the 10. So let's do the last 4 in the other way you can do it, which is with a file of worker IDs. So I've never actually done this, so let's see how it works. This is the help file for the assigned qualifications again, and it says that I can give it a score file. Is it a score file? Yeah, a score file specifies a file which contains a tab-delimited list of worker IDs and optional qualification scores. And I can get specific help on this by going to the documentation on all the different files that command line tools will use. So there's a long list of all these different types of files. I need score file. Here. Okay, tab-delimited file. It contains worker IDs and the qualification scores. So I need a column called worker ID and a column called score. And I don't have to have the column called score if I want to just give the same score to everyone. I think I can just give it to it on the command line. But if I want to give different scores to each person based on their responses or the treatment that they were in, I can give them the score too. So let's create that. Score file .text. The 4 people that I'm using are theirs. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's the first column. Then I'll create another column with the score. I'll give them different scores. So that should be all we need. Save, exit.
So tab delimited just means that there's a tab between the columns. That can mean they're out of alignment like that?
Yeah.
It's just how it accepts it.
Yeah. Okay, so assign qualification. Let me make sure I'm using the right flags again, because I don't remember this off the top of my head. So I'll run the help first, so I have got the list of everything I need to use. So the script name. First of all, I'm going to use do not notify again. Then I'm not going to use this input file of the qualification type because I'm just using the same qualification type again. So I can go back up here and just copy the qual type ID. to there. So I've got the qual type ID. I don't need to give it a score because I have the score in the file, and I don't need to give it a worker ID because that's in the file as well. So I just need to give it the score file, which is scorefile.txt. I've never tried this before, so let's see if it works. Nope, oh, I have to make it a row 5.
Maybe because you return.
Huh, that's interesting. Alright, well, I got rid of the last return, so let's see if that works. Great, you're right. You never know with these things.
If you've never done any programming, you could just be like wasting your time so much looking for that error. And
yeah.
So just like ask for help, because
exactly.
sometimes in 5 seconds could be like, did you accidentally hit return? And you're like, of course. And
yeah.
then you're like, well, you shouldn't have done that. It won't work
and
now.
There's nothing in the documentation to tell you that you shouldn't do that. So it's, you know, once you've made that mistake and figured it out, then you'll never do it again. But it takes a while to figure it out the first time. Okay, so that worked great. We got the last 4 qualifications assigned with different values. Super easy.
So this might be something that a random person, perhaps an RA like you, Zara, will be tasked to go back through all of the MTurk studies and assign a qualification to the people who participated. Most of our studies are run off my account, right? Is anyone running off a different account? Cass, are you running off my account?
Probably sometimes.
Okay, so it might be the case that if it works, we look at like just adding in. Yeah. But it'll be about as well, not every study requires exclusion. Like for example, I can imagine having a Don qualification. You know what I mean? That's the studies that my honor students ran on the collective action project last year and the year before. That would be so much more convenient than excluding the now like 1,200 people. But there may be other studies that just where we look at like norms manipulation or salience manipulation, and we just assign that. It's really cool.
It's even handy just when you have to do a second batch on the same study.
Exactly. Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, actually, that was the wonderful thing when they first allowed you to do this. If you wanted to do a second batch of the same study but not have repeated participants, the only way to do that previously was to just extend the hit. But then that hit, when people searched for hits, would be way down the list because it would be really old. So it's really nice to be able to use the qualifications instead. The other thing that it's really useful for, I don't know if any of you have done multi-phase projects on MTurk, but you can do like a huge initial phase and recruit like 1,000 people, and then do a second phase where you want to have the same participants, and obviously you're going to get some attrition, but you can assign a qualification and require people to have that qualification to even see the hit for the second time. And then only those 1,000 people will be able to see the hit and do it. But obviously, if you're just counting on luck that they happen across it, then you might get a pretty low second response rate. So you can also just notify all of those workers that this new hit is available, and you're inviting them to come do it. And probably if you pay them enough, you'll get a pretty high return rate.
How do you notify?
Exactly. So this is another thing that I've never done, but I looked it up yesterday, and there's this other tool that I didn't know about that seems pretty cool. So what I would have done, because with the basic tools that are available and the command line tools, you can't contact workers directly, but you can grant bonuses, and when you grant a bonus, it has a message. So I would have just granted all of my previous workers a bonus of 1 cent and put a message in saying, thanks for participating in this hit. We'd like to invite you back for this second hit. Here's the URL or whatever. So that's what I would have done. But if you've got 3,000 workers, that'll add up to $70 to do that. So you might as well do it by just contacting them directly. I don't know if you remember last time I told you that the MTurk API is a really powerful set of commands, but the command line tools only allow you to do a certain subset of them that people use a lot, so they've built these tools for it. If you use the actual full force of the API through another programming language like R or Java or JavaScript or Python or whatever, then you can use the API to contact workers en masse. That's totally doable. I learned how to do it from scratch 10 years ago or 7 years ago, whenever it was. So it's very doable, but it is a little bit more of a learning curve to get up to that point. But there's this new, I don't know how new it is actually.
I'm going to pause for a second.
Yeah.
Because I'm still quite excited about what you just said. So using the tools that we learned last week, you could assign like a 1 cent bonus to 1,000 people with a message, because in the tool it allowed us to specify a message that invited them back to a particular study.
Yeah.
That's actually quite cool. Okay, and then there's an even cooler option which may require even more exalted programming.
Well, you don't have to use that.
We're more mortals here. But let's carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you want to use the full API, it's definitely doable. But for the purposes of contacting workers en masse, there's another library that I just found out about called MTurk R. And it's a library for R. So if you already use R, you just install this library and load it, and you can use, it has a little wizard, and you can give it a list of worker IDs and a message, and it will email them en masse. So it handles all of that API interaction in the background for you.
That's so fun. So I'm pausing for a second again. So you know how in undergrad you had to learn SPSS? So that program is insanely expensive, and it's updated really slowly by programmers who don't actually know the statistics that we use. And as a result, there's pressure from unis to move away from R, and there's also pressure from academics because our stats have evolved more quickly than SPSS. So a lot of people are learning this new free program called R. It's really like in an evolutionary state, but almost certainly Hannibal and Haley, you can learn this thing. And a lot of people in our lab have already started to play with it. Cass has developed moderate expertise. Everyone else is in a state of like newbiness, myself included. And so what Vera's saying is that not only will R run amazing statistics, it will also do fancy interactions with MTurk in the background, leaving you laughing. So,
yeah, on R, actually this is R, in economics we use Stata, which is I think very similar to SPSS, but also very expensive.
Even more clunky.
Yeah, and it's really a disaster of a programming language, honestly, but we have to use it because all of these very specialized econometric tests that economists use are built into Stata, and only some of them are built into R. But actually, if all of us in this room, I think, are experimentalists, and the nice thing about experiments is that the data analysis is very straightforward. So you can definitely use R for all your data analysis, and R is going to be faster. It's just far superior to Stata in every way.
There's some problems, but they're for the first generation, and I think they'll be fixed by the time you finish your PhD.
Yeah. R is great, and it's free. Okay, so what this is, this library is called MTurk R, and this page, this website, github.com/ I don't know why this is so small. Oh, it's because the resolution is small. Anyway, so if you just Google MTurk R, you'll find it. You install it really easily. If I open up R, I've got an R command line here, and I've already installed it, so this isn't going to work, but you just use this install command. So I'm not going to actually install it. I've already installed it.
And if you pull out if it's already installed, you can just pull out the library.
Yeah, exactly. So to actually load the library, once you've installed it, you just run this library command. The thing, I'll show you what other thing that you have to set up to actually use this properly. Then there's also a graphical user interface. So right now I can already just type wizard.simple. This should work. It already knows my MTurk access key and secret access key because I've set this up previously. But if I didn't have it set up, I could give it to it now. So you don't actually have to set it up in this other way. So maybe I'll even skip that because you can just type it in now. So I'll say, no, I don't want new credentials. No, I don't want to use a sandbox. And now it gives me all these different commands that I can choose from. So I can check my account balance, create hit. Contact workers is the relevant one here. So if I type 11, I can contact multiple workers by selecting 2. It asks me for a subject line, test subject. Email body text is thank you for participating in my hit. Please complete this other hit. How many workers to notify? Say 5. And then it asks for each worker ID on its own line. So this will get pretty cumbersome to copy each one line by line. So there's another way. You can use the graphical user interface, which allows you to just copy in an entire list. So for that, I have to install this other package, MTurk R GUI, and then I can load that library with this command. And then I think just wizard will open that up. Yeah. So now I've got this little widget thing, and I can choose all these different actions that I can use. So under balance, I can check balance. I can check whether I have sufficient funds to do something. I can do stuff with qualifications, worth workers, contact, same message to 1 or more workers. So that'll open up this other thing. I can just type my email and subject here, and then I can copy in my list of worker IDs right here.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that you can grant bonuses through this and also manage this.
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, I think you can. This also does granting bonuses and assigning qualifications. So I've never used this. I haven't even used this yesterday. I just installed it, and I think there's some account setup error, so it's not actually working. But I think it'll.
So just to be clear, before anyone experiments with granting bonuses through my account, I want to have complete oversight and a lot of precautions taken. But it does seem exciting, and certainly if it can be done through a graphical interface like this in R, it's going to be much easier than through Vera's laboriously developed command line interface. But having said that, like, we need to make sure that it works and it works correctly. So, for example, I can imagine a sinister person who would set up a fake R library to allow like commands, and then it would just divert into their own bank account. You know, why not? So we need to make sure that we have some reviews and we have some reputational stuff before we start handing out the passwords, since there are literally thousands of dollars flying through those accounts.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know a whole lot about this library, but there are a number of blog posts by academics telling you how to use it, so I think it's been around for a little while. And yeah,
signals that you should always wait for before you experiment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's that.
Vera, that is just so helpful. Can we please have a round of applause? So, yeah, just really appreciate it so much. And I know that we'll be experimenting in future, particularly with the qualifications. That seems like something we can try without accidentally bankrupting our lab. And we'll get back to you. Thank you again. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions before we let her go?
So many.